and kind of kickstarts that, but it's all artificial. So it's not the plant growing on its own. And then we talked about this a lot when we talked about Roundup Ready soybeans and things like that. Plants are getting reliable on these. So they're becoming reliant and they can't grow without it now. And that's kind of just something that we keep seeing happening. And that kind of goes into GM crops and all, which we're not going to get into because we kind of already have talked about that. But that's just something that we really have to be conscious of. So what this means to the average consumer is that chemical additives used to bolster plant production have a horrible impact on our bodies and on the environment. So the collapse of ecosystems and continued pollution of natural resources will severely diminish the ability for future generations to procure uncontaminated food and water resources. And again, the Roundup Ready soybean is a good example of this. And then we'll just kind of talk about global deforestation really briefly. So it's another result of our unsustainable practice in agriculture. When soils are tilled, monocrops, chemically sprayed, it leaves lands degraded of beneficial life and nutrients. And so kind of to combat this problem, what we've done is we just continue to go to the next place. Like we find more rich soils and forests and things like that. And the result of this is that we're going in and we're planting and kind of turning these natural areas into farmland, and so what we're doing is we're losing an estimated of 200,000 acres of rainforest a day and over 70 million acres of rainforest a year. So all of the natural life there, all of the plants and animals that have been living in these environments can't survive anymore. They get kicked out and they're stuck trying to find new places. So we're losing hundreds of species of animals in general. And to make that, so agriculture actually accounts for 80% of deforestation in general. Industry kind of takes up most of that, industry and sort of housing. But when referring to deforestation, we're mostly referring to the destruction of habitat for agricultural use. So the loss of biodiversity and ecosystems is an ever-growing global problem and is a major threat to climate stability, global health, and food production, because we're just interrupting these natural systems and processes, kind of just because we overshot and we tilled too much soil. So it all works together in sustainability, and this is kind of why sustainable farming and sustainable agriculture is so important, and that's why there's such a big push for it right now, because we really are, we're going to run out of space to farm, we're going to run out of healthy soil, so we really need to just be proactive right now. So just kind of in conclusion, to summarize some of the articles and some of the key points, we discussed climate change and environmental degradation, sustainability, and how all of it impacts global food supply and our agricultural system. So from the articles discussed, it can be concluded that the rapid rate of environmental degradation is in large part due to humans. And in particular, industrial agriculture plays a huge role in kind of just furthering climate change and environmental degradation. So climate change impacts on crop yield are often integrated with its effects on water productivity and soil water balance. So global warming will influence temperature and rainfall, which will directly have effects on the soil moisture status and groundwater levels. And then crop yield, for example, is constrained to crop varieties and planting areas, soil degradation, growing climate, and water availabilities during the crop growth period. So with temperatures increasing and precipitation fluctuating, water availability and crop production will decrease in the future. If the irrigated areas are expanded, the total crop yield will increase. However, food and environmental quality may degrade. So soil evaporation, plant transpiration will be changed with climate change. So kind of as we're seeing these changes, we're losing our crops, basically. We don't have enough fresh water to care for them. So thus water use efficiency, may decrease in the future. So improving water productivity and keeping stable relations with global food suppliers will be vital for food security in the future. And that's kind of the whole theme of this and why sustainable agriculture is so important and so vital. So now I'll go kind of into my specific views. So I posed a few questions earlier, kind of, I guess, asking whose responsibility is climate change and taking the necessary actions and steps. And there is sort of an ethical dilemma where is it our decision or is it, future generations' responsibility, basically? Is it their problem? And so For me, the rapid rate of climate change, I agree with the article in Progress in Natural Science in regard to climate change. In my opinion, I think it's completely irresponsible of the current generation to not act quickly on climate change. We're in a position where our daily actions and activities can completely slow the rapid rate of climate change and environmental degradation, and therefore save food production as we know it today. Um, and it's overwhelming to me living in the United States to see less developed countries where we are basically going through water and going through resources in completely unsustainable ways. And we're seeing third world and less developed countries struggle because of our overuse for things, basically. And I think that it is completely irresponsible of us to not act more quickly on climate change. Um, and kind of we're faced with a decision about who's more important, us or future generations. And in my opinion, writing off climate change and environmental degradation as a non-issue is the equivalent to saying we are more important than future generations or our descendants. I think it's ignorant for people to not. I think it's our responsibility to be aware of climate change and its impacts and to be aware of our footprint and how our daily actions are affecting the planet. I don't think that people are kind of ignoring sustainable agriculture and sustainable practices in general on purpose, but I think it is a lack of education and sort of an ignorance to it. And I think that it's our responsibility to really learn about it, to take the time and care for the environment and kind of take the necessary steps. Um, so especially in the US, we have the second highest ecological footprint in the world, which is second only to China, who has quadrupled the population of the US, according to the Global Footprint Network. And so this just goes to show that we're using excessive amounts of resources with no consciousness of our waste and how it's affecting the planet. And it is our duty to educate ourselves and make changes to prevent global environmental catastrophe, because that's kind of what's going to happen. And so as far as sustainability, I think there are more pros than cons to switching to sustainable farming, though it is obviously at first expensive to implement. In the long term, it's better for the environment and will increase crop yield and preserve soil over time, which will actually make it cheaper in the long run. So though it is kind of a more expensive practice right now, it's just the cost of kind of changing our practices daily. But then in the long run, we're going to increase crop yields, we're going to save our soil, we won't have to leave as quickly and go kind of through these rainforests. So deforestation is sort of not as much of an issue. So I just think sustainable farming is really going to be the way to go in the agriculture. And as I said before, I think that there needs to be something for farmers to make it worthwhile for them to partake in sustainable agriculture immediately. And so kind of as far as food production goes, as I mentioned earlier when discussing climate change in food production, if we don't make changes in our everyday lives to slow the rapid rate of climate change, then our food production will slow soon thereafter. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation. We won't have healthy, nutritious soil to grow crops, and we'll find very quickly that we won't be able to sustain ourselves in a healthy way by raising only dry crops. So that's sort of the reality of the situation when it comes to climate change and sustainability. We kind of have two choices, and that's to make changes now or eventually starve. So that's all. Thank you guys so much.